Welcome to the 12th station. I'm James Morn, and I'm with my co-host, Mr. Bug Hall.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, y'all. We are blessed to have with us today a very special guest and a personal favorite of us here at the 12th station, Father James Altman. Father, thank you so much for coming.
It's just as always, it is a privilege, and I'm grateful, blessed to be here with you.
Great, Father. Listen, today's discussion is going to be on the attack on the family, and specifically the influence and effects of radical or third wave feminism on the family and society. What radical feminism is not is the idea of equal opportunity. We maintain at its core, skillfully veiled, nonetheless under the mantle of social justice, it is Marxist in nature. Equal outcome. The ideology is permeated everywhere, and be certain there are victims to this ideology, the least of which not being women. I ask you, because I've experienced this personally many times in social settings, how many of you have experienced meeting a married woman in a social setting with families around, engaging in polite conversation, when the subject progresses to one of a more personal nature, like what does one do for a living? How many of you have experienced this? The poor woman sheepishly admitting that, quote, she doesn't really have a job. I'm just a stay-at-home mom, unquote. That on its own merits is absolutely tragic. Bug, give me your thoughts on this, and then, hand it over to Father.
Yeah, my thoughts on your opening statement. Essentially, our Blessed Mother came and she talked about the errors of Russia. And nowadays, a lot of us immediately think about the economic errors of Russia. When we hear that phrase, the errors of Russia, our mind immediately goes to the economic aspect of it, which is true and is a problem. I don't think it's the primary problem, though. I think the core of the errors of Russia is the fractionation of the family. And feminism, I think, is a much larger error of Russia than any of the economic rot that came out of that Marxist ideology. So that's the first thing I'd say. I think it's a much bigger problem. Secondarily, as far as, you talked about the stay-at-home moms, the housemakers, right?
Sure.
There's something we have to realize as men and as a society. Every job that's ever existed, ultimately, on a natural level, ultimately exists for the sake of motherhood, right?
Oh,
Everything we do, its purpose is the rearing of children. It's just the means to provide that home environment necessary to the raising of children, to give mothers what they need to do their very most important jobs, right? And it's something that we've kind of gotten backwards in our society, because our society is very monetary driven. And so we think sort of in the wrong terms there. But every job is ultimately for the sake of mothers. Mothers are the bedrock of our entire society. And we've got to start living like that. And we have to start honoring our wives in that way. And we have to rethink the order of our society so that we're holding up that principle.
Yes. Wow. Before Father Altman, before you jump in, I wanted to make a point. Michael Hitchborn at Lepanto always makes this point.
Yes.
And it's like what you just described is, the modern call it free market, or rather capitalism, more accurately, is concerned with materialism. It's the other side of the Marxist coin. Same coin, just the other side, if you follow my logic.
Well, and it's gone so far around too, because, don't get it twisted. The Marxists are just as interested in materialism as the capitalists.
Oh, that's what they're based on, right?
So they come all the way around and meet on the other end, so to speak.
Exactly. Father, what do you got?
Well, once I launch,
we're kind of hoping.
Here's the thing. Feminism, the radical feminism that we're facing today, was a Russian invention to destroy faith and family. I think we talked about that once before. One aspect of that is daycare, and I always get in trouble when people complain about me when I say daycare is evil. It is not from God. There's no substitute. Listen, here it is. There is no substitute for mommy care, period. You're putting your kids, which God has entrusted to you, into the hands of another at a young age. That's exactly the Russian error that they started way back in 1917. So if you've done that, you better fall on your knees and repent, because you have failed in your duty to raise your children that God has given you. And that is the truth, that you can't get a bishop to stand up and say, you can't get a priest to stand up and say it, point out that daycare is evil. It wasn't created by God. Listen, St. Joseph, what you guys said about the men and how we're supposed to take care of our wives and children. What did St. Joseph do? He took care of Mary and Jesus. And that was his job. And Mary didn't shuffle Jesus off to daycare so she could get her worth out of some career apart from raising Jesus. That's the holy family. Now, if you want to be an unholy family, well, okay, well, you go right ahead. Don't pretend you're a Christian and don't pretend you're a Catholic, because you're not. That's actually true. And it's about time somebody stood up and said so. And I'm talking about the miters who have failed to tell people. Okay, and it's not like they have an excuse, because our Blessed Mother warned us 100 plus years ago exactly what's going on today. Archbishop Sheen warned us 70 years ago. There is no excuse for not knowing this. It is so blatant, it's so obvious. And I can, oh gosh, well, you see the results.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pardon?
Absolutely. Mass shooters, by the way, mass shooters. One of the common denominators between all the mass shooters of the last 25 years, daycare.
Right. Daycare.
And Bug, I think no fathers, if I'm not mistaken, right? Daycare and no fathers. I mean, and by the way, guys, since we're talking about this, what is the government now putting forth that they're going to pay for daycare? That it's a great. Are you out of your skull?
Exactly.
We've really gotten off the beam here, guys. Could I frame it up? Would that be okay?
Please.
Yeah.
Give us the facts, Mr. Mon.
Yeah, you got it, sir. Mr. Hall, I would be more than happy. So as we were kind of putting this together, as we always say, you don't agree with us, be civil about it. Come on, we'll debate you. I mean, that's what we say it all day long. So we mean it. So feminism at its core, and there's no other way of saying this, is a bullying lie. Like we said earlier, women have suffered tremendously from this bullying. Some because the narrative is so firmly entrenched, because if you disagree or you have a question, you get canceled. Father, you know all about that. That wasn't a wise guy comment, right? Anyway, the ideology put forth that men, here's another fallacy. The ideology that they put forth is that men and women are the same, physically, emotionally. That's absolute nonsense. Feminism denigrates women who choose to take the path in life that serves, let's say, traditional family roles. Feminism at its core views the traditional family as ideological servitude. The movement to enact these principles is, at the end of the day, by the way, enforced, meaning that they want laws to be made, meaning the intent of the law is to enforce. And as a side note, that is always done at the barrel of a gun. That's, there's no other way around it. How else are laws enforced? Which, by the way, is kind of interesting and funny, because these people love guns, except if you have one, but I digress. So lastly, feminism purports their greatest lie, which at its core is that this radical third wave feminism is Marxist, meaning the world is viewed as a power hierarchy. It's to be dismantled and then redistributed in their minds as fairly. This is an incredibly stupid assumption. The assumption belies in the fact that all humans are equal with respect to their abilities intellectually. It's nonsense. Mm-hmm. So if we don't have enough Black women neurosurgeons, for example, that is and that they're exactly representative of the demographic makeup of the world. It's because of the male patriarchy or hierarchy. Go ahead, Father. Please excuse the interruption from our lively discussion with Father Altman. Just wanted to take a moment to discuss something very important. St. Joseph Partners is our sponsor. They are a service provider to individual investors and institutions focused on physical gold, silver, and other precious metals. History points to physical gold, precious metals in your possession as a great protector of your family's wealth. Right now, inflation is hard to ignore. Currencies, governmental systems can fail. Having physical precious metals on hand is an excellent insurance policy. Call St. Joseph Partners or visit our website here on the screen. There are no high-pressure sales tactics. They will help you and answer your questions. They are committed to their charity of promoting spiritual fasting. They have funded Fast for America for 10 years now to pray for God's protection of our nation. So please consider St. Joseph Partners if you are, or anyone else you know is considering purchasing gold or physical precious metals. Phone number, website address right here on the screen. Now back to our show.
Did you happen to see this video of this 84-year-old Black woman who's now Nancy Pelosi is trying to put on as the chair of the Transportation Committee in the House? And she's driving a Prius, right? And you know how like angle parking, let's see, make angle parking, all the cars go in the same angle, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
She comes in at the exact opposite angle and then hits the two cars beside her. Listen, if you can't drive,
The transportation.
if you can't even drive a Prius,
Right.
you shouldn't have a position of power anywhere. Go home and be a grandmother.
Right.
Anyway,
That's good.
But that's a fine example of, well, let's just have this demographic thing going on. Let's have our quotas, regardless of meritocracy. Let's have a quota.
Forget who's qualified for what, right? It's all about check boxes.
That's right.
Exactly.
In
Wasn't
my
that how
old career-
Kamala Harris there got her appointment? Last in the entire Democratic field, and somehow let's check those boxes and put her in as the most useless vice president ever.
And that's the big problem, right? In my old field, anytime I sold a show or a movie, there were check boxes. How many of this kind of person do you have on the writing staff? How many of this kind of person? They had an actual list that we had to fulfill. It was
insane.
absurd. I couldn't just hire the best people for the job.
Right.
I had to fill the boxes.
Wow, and I know you know all about this being in Hollywood because that's their whole shtick. And but this stunning lie is fascinating because it really is so diabolical in nature because as Father Altman mentioned earlier, it's no longer a competence or merit hierarchy. Everything is viewed from the prism of power, and the power has to be deconstructed, and the system's broken, and we're gonna take that power and redistribute it. It's insane. It's actually diabolical. Go ahead.
Not only is it insane, it makes everyone miserable. There was a study done in one of the Nordic countries. I can't remember which one. And keep in mind, this is one of the most, quote unquote, liberal progressive places in the world. They did not expect to get the results they got from these studies. What they found,
folks. Jordan Peterson, right? And it was
Jordan
Sweden.
Peterson, let's talk about this.
Yeah, it was Sweden. Go ahead. Take it.
It was Sweden. What they found was that is when they leveled out all the as much of the playing field as they could, when they mandated as much of the equal hiring opportunity stuff as they could, women tended to still end up in the job positions that were nurturing in their nature.
Yes.
Right? They still ended up as nurses, doctors, caretakers, any social workers, anything that was nurturing in its nature. And they were baffled by this because why aren't they engineers? Right. Why aren't they working in the oil fields? Why aren't they doing these, how come there's not an equal distribution of men and women? The fact is, men and women are different. Our inclinations are different. Our natures are wildly different. Yes. And so the women in America that are trying to keep up with the ideology, right? They want to be a representative of the ideology. Sure. They're miserable because they're forcing themselves to do things they don't actually want to do.
It's contrary to the nature that God made him. Do you see how godless this is? Which is, of course, Marxism, communism, socialism. God is out of the picture. God created two genders, very different talents, and even the differential distribution of talents within any gender.
Right.
So the idea that equality is Christian, no, it is not. Period. It is not Christian. God, you see it. It's in sacred scripture. Some people have been given different talents. Well, even Jesus in this parable said, well, this one gets 10, this one gets 5, this one gets like 2. God himself, through Jesus, tells us there's a differential distribution of talents. So we can't put everybody is not equal. Sorry if you don't like it, tough. Because listen, if you only got 2, I'd be happy. Then you only have to produce 2 extra, right? You're not going to be held to the 10 standard later on. But as to genders, they're absolutely, completely different, and with different. Your being in essence is completely different. And when you violate your gender, well, that's what what's it called, transgenders. Yeah, that's why they have 6-7 times the suicide rate that nobody will talk about. Because they're violating their very being in essence. That's why with abortionists, with people who get the abortions, they are haunted for the rest of their life.
I wanted to actually ask you, Father, because one of the things that we don't have a perspective on, but you certainly would. Yeah. We talk about all the ideological errors in the culture. You as a priest who has, from my perspective, a really fatherly heart, right? You can always tell the real fathers of the world because they're usually outspoken. And it must be absolutely heartbreaking for you to see the brokenness of these people coming into the confessional, trying to get back on track after a lifetime of being ripped to pieces by wrong ideology, right? These aren't victimless ideologies. Right. These things affect the real lives of people. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure. That's if I can I get really irritated. It's a rule. I call it the rule of a lot. A lot of people have a lot to say about a lot of things they know nothing about. You sit in the confessional and you find out what this ideology has done to the hearts and souls of both men and women, because men are just as affected by this insanity. And you see it, for instance, I'll see decades later, they'll say, I've never told anyone this before. And then they reveal then the brokenness that they have experienced because they succumbed at a young age to the pressures of society. Promiscuity, can I just throw something in here?
Please.
People talk about, we got to end abortion. We got to end abortion. You will never end abortion until you end promiscuity in our culture. And one of the Marxist things is promiscuity, because it destroys family and traditional family values. But that promiscuity then reveals itself in the brokenness that comes into the confessional. And you see it, and yet you get, people in positions of power who continues to support this lie, the big lie of Satan himself. This is from hell. Daycare, I'll get in trouble for this again, but daycare is from hell.
Yes.
The promiscuity is from hell. Another example, you can always, this isn't live, right?
No, we can, please.
Okay, so just this past week, I happened to notice something like a headline or something. They were having a minute of silence or something like that in all of Ireland, because in Tullamore, which I've driven by there many times, a young woman in her early 20s was abducted and murdered. And it was just, you could just see it coming. The typical, all the feminazis over there had, and of course the media, which is owned by the people that are supporting this agenda, all came out and saying, this violence against women has to cease. They just keep hammering the same narrative, right?
Right.
And the irony about all this is that Ireland just passed here not too long ago the most grave violence against women in the form of aborting their babies, of murdering the babies in their womb. You want to end violence against women, start there. You want to end violence against women, start upholding the beauty of a woman as a mother, as a wife, as a maiden, as a virgin. Start upholding that. You know what? And there will be a concomitant increase in respect and dignity that men have for women. But the women bought into the whole feminazi lie, and the men were happy with this. Why not? Because then the women weren't protecting their sanctity, their holiness, their chastity. They were just loose women. And we had a word for this when I was a younger man that you can't even say these days. Several words, several descriptive adjectives for that woman who did not preserve and protect her dignity as a woman in her chastity and her purity. So that they want, so the absurdity of it is they're all up in arms. And by doing so, by continuing this narrative about can't have violence against women, they're only supporting what they're achieving the exact opposite result. And sorry,
well said, Father.
There, but
that's the big lie. That's the big lie, right? What I see is this built-in narrative, this violence against women, right? And it's all predicated on the false history that women have been subjugated for all time by some imaginary patriarchy. I'm a big fan of history. I study history quite a bit, and what I see when I look at history is I see a beautiful dance between men and women. I see a beautiful cooperation, right? Sure. When people were always living on the brink of starvation, life was always hard, right? Wow. It took both both sexes steering into their talents, steering into what they were best at. Because if you were not steering into what you were best at, you weren't going to make it. And so you had this beautiful dance going on throughout history that really elevated our culture. And then we just, well, by the way, we're resting on those foundations and taking it for granted while trying to saw the branch out from under us.
Okay. Guys, can I back up a second?
Analogy.
Yeah, it is a good analogy. If I could, guys, can I back up for a second? I wanted to clarify something because we were talking earlier about equality. In God's eyes, I believe, Bug, you were referring to this earlier. We all have the same dignity, not equality, right? Wasn't that the term that we were discussing earlier?
Yeah, equal in dignity.
Yes, equal in dignity.
By the merit of our baptism or potential baptism, right?
Right.
Equal in the dignity that we can all be in the beatific vision someday.
Yeah.
That is our equal dignity. St. Thomas Aquinas, I mentioned in the last show, states very clearly there are no two created things that are equal.
Yes.
Not a single two things in the entirety of creation are equal. Not two seemingly equal rocks, not two human beings, not two angels.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very sorry. And listen, in deference to back up everything you guys are saying, you didn't know I had this information, but I'm going to pop it by you. You said before, I think Father and Bug, you agreed. One of the things that's most interesting is that women, by every metric, are increasingly unhappy. And here's just one I'm going to give you. Yeah. A study began in 1972 called the United States General Social Survey, right?
Okay.
Basically, since 1972, here are the findings. Women in the United States have become less happy, both absolutely and relative to men.
Yeah.
The decline in women's happiness is a trend seen across groups, both working, stay-at-home moms, and for those married and divorced, the young and the old, across the education spectrum, etc. Finally, these same trends appeared across industrialized countries for which there is sufficient happiness data. Now, I just think that it proves everything you talk about. Then you add to the fact a myriad of other data, like, for example, the amount of psychotropic antidepressive drugs, all those sorts of things, which is a monstrous point. They're handing those things out like chiclets. Like, see what happens. Like, we'll just give it a shot here. Yeah. And so it's just sort of to get to your point. And I thought it was really interesting. And yet we're having this discussion. You guys are bringing up some great points, particularly with Father Altman's point about like daycare. And yet it's not even thought about. And there's so many examples in our own lives where we know that, if people had, really kind of, embraced natural law and to Father, to your points about promiscuity, men, this is where we got to jump on. We always talk about solutions, Bug, right?
Yep.
This is where we have to have virtue. This is where we got to be strong.
There's a helpful trick that I use when I'm looking at the principles, right? Sure. A long time ago, a great priest walked me through the sins of Adam and Eve. Right? Eve committed 6 sins. Adam committed the same 6 sins and then 1 extra. And they're two, by the way, again, unequal. They're 2 unequal punishments pertained to those sins and the differences between that one. Adam's extra sin was capitulation of his duty, right? Because he wasn't there to protect Eve, right? Yes. Now, one of Eve's sins is usurpation, right? Because she took the fruit to Adam and upended the hierarchy by giving him the fruit, right? Mm-hmm. Now, here's the thing. Everything that flows down from feminism in our culture are those 2 differences. Eve, the punishment for Eve was that she would desire to her husband. Now, what the church fathers all say about that is what that means is she will want to usurp her husband's authority. She will want to be on equal footing with her husband, right? Yes. And Adam, us men, our defect now is that we want to capitulate our responsibility. We don't want to be responsible. Now, look at feminism. What it does is it removes responsibility from men. Hooray, right? Men are out there hooting and hollering. No more responsibility. Exactly. We get to eat our cake and we don't have to pay for it, right? Yeah. And women are playing this unwinnable game of trying to become equal with men, right? To put themselves on some equal social setting where authority hierarchy has been flattened out. Neither of us will ever be happy while steering into our defects. It's only when we courageously upend that and defeat those two defects within ourselves. The happiest wives I know are the ones who have fought tooth and nail to learn to be obedient to their husbands out of love, right? And husbands who have learned to be responsible for their families out of love.
Yes.
Those two things are what rebuild the culture.
Yeah. Wow. That's a good wedding homily, by the way.
Father, you must see this all the time with your considerable pastoral experience. Can you comment on that? I was thinking, you must really, I mean, you really had a front row seat to this kind of thing for years.
Yeah. It's kind of humorous, but in the confessional, what you often hear is the spouse's sins, and it's always the spouse's fault. And I think that's more. I think I can say this, that I think I hear that more from women than men, and I haven't tried to discern why that might be the case. But the offloading personal responsibility for one's care of one's spouse, whether one be a man or woman, one in the wedding homilies, I'll often say that that it's the man who will marriage at last is the man who will do anything for his wife, and the wife who will do anything for her husband, and both of them will sacrifice to attain that goal, the happiness of the other. It all boils down to selfishness in the end. Like, I'm not going to make my spouse happy because I'm too selfish. I want to make myself happy. God is supposed to. God wants me to be happy, right? Isn't that what you often hear as the excuse for the breakdown and breakup of families? Well, God wants me to be happy. Well, it's in giving that you receive. If you make your spouse happy, that, let me tell you, the rewards come back at you. So I see it in the brokenness of families, and there's so much more of it now than there used to be. But that's because it has that family concept, that stick through it all together, has been denigrated and devalued in our culture, all because, God wants us to be happy, right? So I'm going to trade this model in for a new model, and that's going to make me happy, which, as we know, doesn't.
Right.
Did that answer your question? Or
Yeah. And by the way, just to comment on that, I'd like to pick that up because I think it's really powerful. What you just said, God wants me to be happy. Don't think so. Don't think it's his primary concern. No, I'm not being flip here.
Yeah.
I think
it's actually true.
Yeah, he wants us to be holy, number one. Yeah. Number two is, and Jordan Peterson, Bug, you and I listen to this guy. I know, Father, you do too. Even from a secular standpoint, he makes this point brilliantly. Happiness is a byproduct of a life of meaning, and that's secular.
Yeah, that's
a good way to
put it.
Yeah, it's a byproduct. I ask you guys this, and please take it, because I get in this conversation, and it always goes the same way, and I always say this, and people always, their eyes glaze over, and this guy's a lunatic, right? And I go, you're not going to believe this, but the entire, but let me get this straight. What do people really want most out of life? To be happy. And that really does mean every day, a lot of people wake up every day and ask the question, how can I be happy? Okay, stop right there. In the first place, it's complete narcissism, egocentrism, and it's selfishness, right? Now, and the dirty little secret is, when you break your back for other people in the confines of a Christian marriage, for example, happiness is overflowing.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the paradox. And yet you say to people, and I go, and it always boils down to one thing too, and it has to do with culture. And this is what happens when we get away from Christ. When we get away from Christ, right? And when all of a sudden we abandon that notion, and now Christ is relegated to what I call a vending machine. Very much like when I go to yoga, and I'm not really feeling all that hot, and I'm kind of upset. So I really need some Jesus Christ right now. I don't mean that blasphemously. I don't. I mean, so we're gonna pull the handle. I need you now. That's not the point. Yeah. It's like Bug always says. It's about the name of the station. It's the 12th station, and the carrying the cross to get there.
Yes.
And therein lies the paradox. And you guys have spoken eloquently. I've heard you on the past, maybe not framed up that way. Please take it, because I think that's not a small point. Because when you talk to people, they're like, "What are you talking about? You know, what do you mean I was supposed to be happy? It's so countercultural. They're looking at you like you're nuts."
Yeah. It's only through the cross, right? We have to aim for meaning, and
Yes.
as Catholics, we have an abundance of meaning. The world is desperate for meaning in their lives. We have it. We have the answer. Unfortunately, and Father, you know this far better than I do. Unfortunately, the hierarchy it has decided to tell people that the cross is optional.
Well, that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's very strong, Mr. Hall.
I had when I was going for to take part in, before you're ordained, you go on a retreat, whether it's a deacon retreat or the priest retreat. And my spiritual director, which was one of the few good Jesuits, holy man, he gave me a holy card it was called the Smiling Jesus. And when you look at the portrayal of Jesus, who has now died on the cross, normally he looks like hell because he's just been through hell.
Yeah.
And but in this particular one, the artist captured the essence of the cross. You see the expired Jesus, but there is this look of peace and joy on his face that he's not smiling, but you can see peace and you can see joy, because out of love, he just sacrificed himself. And if we understood that carrying the cross is not a burden that makes us unhappy, but rather the burden that makes us joyful.
Yes.
We would look upon this, what seems to be considered a noxious duty, as something you would long for. One of the great saints, it might have been Teresa of Avila. No, maybe it was Therese, said something to the effect of, if only we knew the grace that comes with suffering, we would be begging God for more. It might have been Teresa of Avila. I can't remember. Somebody can fact check me on that one. But we'd be begging for more. We'd be begging for a heavier cross. And because that's where our joy will come from. And you see that, as I said, in that holy card called the Smiling Jesus, which is not a reflection of smiling like we're smiling from time to time, but
sure,
that peace and that joy. There was, Father Crappy had this one really good, a seminarian was dying, and he walked in his last moments, and though he had been delirious and sweating and just because he was dying of some sort of a cancer, at the very last minute, he sat up in bed. If I got this correct, and he said, "You can't believe the joy." I think he said it 2 or 3 times, and then he died. He was that close to the veil that he could see the joy of the suffering that he was enduring. So the answer is the cross. The answer to every bit of suffering is the cross, and the joy that comes from thanking God for it. I say that to a lot of people. You have to thank him for the cross. In a humorous way, you could say, thank him that it isn't any heavier than it is. But no, thank him genuinely for the cross. Thank him for the pain and suffering, because it is through that pain and suffering, carrying that cross, that not only joy comes to you, but grace comes to those you love. And that's a very unselfish approach to it. But that is indeed the what we're all to work for, and all we do in life is to become unselfish givers. Because as Jesus himself said, it's in giving you receive. We talked about that a little bit ago. It's not something you're getting out of the culture, which is all about me. Feminism is all about me. A woman, it's all about me, my career, my promiscuity. I don't want to be criticized for being a promiscuous. Remember I said we had adjectives for that. I said,
sure,
I am not young, but I don't. And you said, Jim, that men have to be virtuous and start promoting that. But I distinctly remember as a teenager not hearing much promotion of a woman's virtue from the time I was a young teen till even now. you don't really hear that much. It's a very Christian approach to life. God has just been canceled.
He's been canceled. That's right.
He's been canceled. And you bring that up, oh gosh,
Yes.
you'll get canceled too.
Well, and
Yeah.
ultimately, every evil is an attack
Yes.
on masculinity in some way, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is, the Marxists knew what they were doing. This wasn't an accident, right? The glass theory that they promoted, it was a big theory in communist Russia very early on. They knew that they could create irresponsible, soft men if they could get the women to stop being the guardians of purity and chastity.
Right.
They knew that they could pull the rug out from under men. And if you have soft men, you can control them, right? When men are attached to frivolous pleasures, you can. It's like a dog with a rag. You can just pull them all over the place, any which way you want, right? And that was the idea, and it worked.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Bug, is that
you just summarized it
so
so beautifully, Bug, because that is exactly right.
Yeah, that was really well done. But I was going to say, is that why there was never a shortage of vodka in Russia? I mean, they ran out of. No, I'm not being a watch guy. They ran out of everything else, but man, there was always plenty of vodka.
Yeah.
You know, keep them well oiled. And
anytime you see totalitarian regimes, right, all throughout history, you see bread and circus.
Yes.
Right? You see all the pleasures that world can provide being provided in abundance. Yeah. Nothing else is provided in abundance, by the way.
Right.
But pleasure, keep it coming. Today we have sports ball and porn, right?
Yeah.
Just keep
all you want. All you want, man. All you
want. 24 hours a day, free of charge. Keep the men soft. Keep them from wanting to fight, right? Because that way to the cross is a hard fight, and
in our human nature is to take the path of least resistance, and certainly the path of least resistance is not struggling for virtue, but taking the soft road.
Please excuse the interruption from our lively discussion with Father Altman. Just wanted to take a moment to discuss something very important. St. Joseph Partners is our sponsor. They are a service provider to individual investors and institutions focused on physical gold, silver, and other precious metals. History points to physical gold, precious metals in your possession as a great protector of your family's wealth. Right now, inflation is hard to ignore. Currencies, governmental systems can fail. Having physical precious metals on hand is an excellent insurance policy. Call St. Joseph Partners or visit our website here on the screen. There are no high-pressure sales tactics. They will help you and answer your questions. They are committed to their charity of promoting spiritual fasting. They have funded Fast for America for 10 years now to pray for God's protection of our nation. So please consider St. Joseph Partners if you are or anyone else you know is considering purchasing gold or physical precious metals. Phone number, website address right here on the screen. Now back to our show.
And so has the church failed us? Have the shepherds of the church failed us in telling us and reminding us constantly to live a life of virtue, you men? Well, how can you preach that kind of virtue when you're kind of problematic yourself?
Right.
I'm thinking night night baby. I'm thinking night night baby. That guy. Sorry, that was probably bad.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but you did.
I went
so
there.
Good.
Am I in trouble, Bug?
Nope. You're spot on. We always need you to bring us back around to the harder truths.
I know, man. I just kind of go, wow. You know, guys, I was thinking, I don't know if this is true, but because it makes me out to sort of like the messenger, here's the altar boy. But what I'm saying is that, abortion, all these things, if men, regardless of what everyone else is doing, could recapture that, we wouldn't have abortion. Do you know? Do you know what I mean by that point? Yeah. Whereas, kind of what Bug's saying and Father's saying, like if we were strong enough, and Father, you were right, man. There was not a lot of talk. I think we're about the same age, and there was not a lot of talk as I know growing up. And certainly modesty was an anachronism. I mean, that was from a past era. You were only limited by your physical condition. Even then, not really. Anyway, Bug, what were you going to say?
No, you mentioned obviously abortion flows directly out of the errors of feminism, right? I mean, they're intrinsically linked. And we talk about how soft our society is, how addicted we are to just the most frivolous pleasures. Right? You look back now, infanticide has always been a part of pagan culture, right? Wherever you find paganism, you find infanticide.
Yeah.
It's rampant throughout history. The only place you don't find it is in the rise of Christendom. Now, get this though. At least, and this is not me in any way defending infanticide and paganism, at least what they thought they were doing was some great sacrifice to some deity that they believed was going to provide great yields of food and save their civilization, right? It was a high concept, the lowest and most horrible of all evils, right?
Yes.
What do women commit that evil for now? So that they can continue going to TGI Fridays on Tuesday night with their friends.
Yeah. Do you know, when you think about what you just said, and I have said this before, that in these societies that were pagan, that would offer their babies or their virgins, right? Mm-hmm. Look what they valued. They valued virginity because that's who they offered to the volcano god, right? Or the babies, the young ones. They always offered what they valued because they knew that they had to give their best to this pagan god to appease him. Yeah. But now, as between them and our culture now, they have a redeeming quality to their offering. What are we doing now? Like you were saying, they just kill the babies out of pure selfishness, as if the babies are worthless.
Mm-hmm.
As if
we have fallen so much lower than anyone could have ever imagined, right?
Exactly.
We are well below what any of the most horrendous dark cultures in history ever descended to.
Yeah.
Wow, great point, man. Just as a side note, I was lucky to have a lot of guys around me, my father, grandfather, who I would consider to be very pious men, very Catholic. They were saying when Roe v. Wade passed, and I was a little kid, and I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that of abortion at that age. I was like, wow, that's really unbelievable. And they were saying next stop, infanticide and euthanasia. And these guys were saying this, and people were laughing at them. And they weren't laughing. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Where are we? I guess also back to Father Altman's point, which is very strong. The impact and the power, I should say, the deleterious effects of promiscuity. I mean, if you don't understand, even on a practical level, I mean, I was reading this study about the amount of sexual partners one has is in direct correlation to your ability to pair bond. Mm-hmm. You can't. There's no action without a equal and opposite reaction. You can't do this stuff, and you wonder why everyone's running around happy. So two things, that, and also this really distorted notion that they're supposed to be blissfully happy every day of their life, which is horrible.
All right.
So what do you guys say? We're Bug, I think we're almost at the end, actually. If we're not mistaken.
I was looking at the clock and I said, how time flies.
I know. I was like, wow, man. It's like we were trying to keep this to right around 40 minutes. But gosh, any final comments, gentlemen?
Pray much and suffer well.
Well, I love when he says that. I was like, and Father Altman, my gosh, for those at home watching this, man, you really go out of your way to help us out. It's just a treat to have you, man. We're huge fans of yours.
Thank you for as we work this through so we could get a day where we all could be on at the same time. This worked out really, really well. Even despite the distractions from Griffin here.
Man, that's a big dog, Father.
Remember, we talked earlier, and you brought it up again, how the way we talked when we were younger.
Yes.
But, okay. So this is going to drive the feminazis crazy when I say this, but even as we spoke as we did in an irreverent and an impure manner as young teens and young men, we nevertheless then placed a real and genuine value on the purity of who we wanted to marry in the end. Yes. And those who were some of those adjectives that we used back then, should I just say them so that a couple of them?
Sure. Girl, I think so. Sure.
Tramps.
Right.
And we had those words for the girls that were easy, right?
Sure.
And it wasn't somebody that you really wanted to marry. But nowadays, because since I mean, they're doing things in junior high now, literally.
Yeah, look at the numbers.
And so by the time you get out of high school, get off to college, of course, you know how that is. Even when I was in college, we knew the difference between the good girls, the bad girls. Yep. And that double standard, there is a double standard. You know
Absolutely.
why? Because God made us different. And you just have to, you have to accept that God made us different.
Sure. And
men are visually stimulated, unlike women. That is just a physiological, neurological fact. Period.
Well, I want to jump on that real quick, Father, because you're 100% right in this sense. The deepest desire of the women is, and they say it again and again and again, right? We have social media. Why can't I find a good man? Why can't I find a good man? Yeah. Why can't I find someone who's going to take care of me and treat me well and respect me? Right. Yeah. And then they go and commit the kind of behavior that attracts the wrong kind of men, the exact men that they're trying to avoid. And they can't figure, there's no good men left, they'll say. Well, we're not looking at you. I beg your pardon, but we're avoiding our gaze so that we aren't scandalized, because we guard ourselves, right? The good men, they're guarding themselves. If you want a good man, you have to do the difficult work of elevating yourself to that level. And it's the same with men, right? The difference is, though, those reprehensible men, in their state of reprehensibility, they aren't interested in responsibility. They'll play that game all day and be happy, because their exact sin is the sin of capitulation of their duty. Right? So they're happy to stay in that state. They'll play the game all day long. It's the women who get the short end of the stick, right?
Yes, they do. Do you know what? When I've seen this in spades, is in dress.
Yes,
and in the modesty of dress. When you dress with modesty, real men, the good men, are attracted to that. I mean, it's so rare you see it nowadays.
I know.
But nowadays, what are those? There's a word for it. These really, really skin tight pants that the girls are wearing. And now some men are wearing them too, which is kind of creepy. But they wear that, and I'm thinking to myself, I just saw it yesterday.
Yoga pants?
Is that what they're called?
Is that right, Bug?
The yoga pants, leggings.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, they're leaving nothing to the imagination.
Sure.
If you want to dress in that fashion, then what in the world do you expect men to think or be inclined to do? Mm-hmm. So it's just the way it is, and that's the way God made us. And if you don't like it, talk to Him, right?
Yeah.
But
real quick,
go ahead.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Father. Go ahead, finish up.
Well, in a godless society, then you could I guess theorize that men shouldn't be that way, and they should accept the fact that women can dress like those adjectives I mentioned earlier.
That's the Marxist principle, right?
And that should be okay, because that's
human nature.
Yeah. So
it's trying to get utopia while discounting human nature. Real quick,
yes, exactly.
Solutions.
Yeah.
We always promise solutions here. What are some things that individuals can do in their own life to counter this problem?
Great question.
Father, would you like to jump us off?
Okay, well, all right. So I'm on day 3 of Exodus 90. And because they asked me, this group of great holy men out in Virginia, to be their spiritual director over this. So I said yes, not knowing what I was getting myself into. And that cold showers bit, that's a little rough for me in the morning. I am not Walter Chizik, I can tell you that right now. What is the whole point of Exodus 90? That I think Father Howman started this, the great Father Howman, holy priest in the Diocese of Madison. The point of it all is to build men's virtue through aestheticism and through prayer. And there's a third thing. Like I said, I'm only on day 3, so I'm learning this as I go. So for men, check it out and study the principles of Exodus 90, because let me tell you, if you start living those principles, it makes a world of difference. For women, understand what God created you to be, but you're never going to understand that unless you actually know your faith. And for men and for women, that takes effort. But like you said earlier, Bug, you're the one that brought up the bread and circuses, which I think the Roman philosopher Juvenal first stated in, I think, year 150 AD.
Yep.
Both for men and women, you got to get rid of some of the circuses. And actually, one of the things I just learned this last night, somebody who had done Exodus 90 twice already said that in the voluntary asceticism, when you remove things from your life, like eating between meals, music, TV, that cell phone thing, all of a sudden there's an emptiness, and you'll feel the pain of that emptiness. And if you fill that pain with good, holy things, your life changes. That goes for men and women. So I guess get rid of the bread and circuses and start focusing on the one thing, which is eternity, that truly matters. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, very, very strong.
Absolutely. That's great advice.
And Bug, if I could add something, I think again, it's solution based. I think a big part of it is in your own home. I have a daughter, just hold a certain standard. What goes on in your home on the boob tube? What enters into your home? If you have a boob tube, I mean, which is even wonderful if you don't. But all of those things, and as men, we can guard our eyes, like you were saying. It's not a small point because, man, I don't have to tell you, you guys are guys, and I live in South Florida. It's brutal. Mm-hmm. You just have to be constantly vigilant. It's and there's a whole South American influence, and I'm not just saying, I mean, really true. In constant vigilance, you're like, wow, you guys are, it's brutal, and it is the culture, and I think, I think that in our small corner of the world, personal mastery is where it starts, and that's not an easy thing. And like to Father Altman, what he was saying. Get rid of the circus and and kind of fill it full of stuff that's going to keep your eyes on eternity.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And I want to add to that, because that's both of those points marry together so well. And right in the middle, you have that idea that men should be looking for women who want to fulfill those principles alongside them. Right.
Yes.
We've got to let go of all of our aesthetic attachments, because our culture is just rotten to the core. What we teach men that they're supposed to be looking for in a wife is all wrong. And we have got to detach from that and say, I want a woman who wants to fulfill the principles with me. That's
and get each other into heaven, which is, I think, the job. Right?
Yep. And so often, even with good Catholic men, what I see is them still leaning on their aesthetic preferences and trying to bend their view of the woman into, but she kind of also wants to fulfill the principles. She's got some problems, but we'll fix those later. No, you won't. If she's not committed to it, no, you won't.
Yeah.
Because beginning the process of saying, I actually want to submit to my husband and live a life of virtue here in the home and raise holy children. The gap from the culture to that is so big. If your partner is not already on board with that, it's the wrong partner. Right. So pick someone that wants to do that with you, and then hunker down. Live it, man. Live it. Teach it to your children by your example. They will go out into the world and they will spread that ideology by their own actions. It's a grassroots movement all over again, and we've got to live those principles.
Yep, and we've all seen it actually work, and that was a great comment. And also, if I could, the authority of the husband thing, and also understand the nuances and the real authority and where it stands, and really do your homework on that. That doesn't mean get me a beer, I mean, you know what I mean, kind of thing. But that's for another show, because that's a beautiful ideation.
We absolutely have to do an episode or two on authority and the how authority functions in the home, right? Because authority is service. Right, our Lord came and taught us that very recently. Authority is service. We only have rights because we have duties. Right.
There you go. Great, guys. I got to tell you, I really enjoyed it. Bug, as always, my man. And Father Altman, thank you again.
You're welcome.
You always make time for us
to do it again.
Yep.
Sometime.
And
it's my privilege, and I genuinely mean that. Thank you.
We're so happy to have you, Father.
Right.
I admire you so much, by the way. I've watched you for a long time, and you're an inspiration to me. You're a constant
thanks be to God. Likewise.
A constant reminder that the truth is always the the tool we have that cannot be taken from us.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well said. We'll leave it there, guys. And
Okay.
this is Jim Wong with Bug Hall and our good friend Father James Altman. This is the 12th station, and we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks again. Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva Cristo Rey.